Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 135.
135.
And this is the one where we are just going to ignore all that just happened and continue forward. If you're with us for the first time, I want to welcome you. My name is Greg Harrison, the senior pastor at the church that sponsors the podcast called Olive Branch Community Church. Probably your pastor, and so glad that you're joining with us. This is the podcast where we chase the truth wherever it runs. We want to pick up things we may have dropped off or clarify things that were all brought up in the sermon. And so we're excited to just invite you on this journey, just kind of run around and figure out all kinds of interesting stuff as we dive in. And I don't do this alone, but I do this with my fellow rabbit chasers and my friends. So, which is important since you are my friends. We're talking about friendship. Why don't you guys say hi?
Cool. Hello.
Friends.
I'm Greg's friend.
Okay, I'm not your friend anymore. That was weird. That's good.
Hello, my name is Stephen Oldham. I'm a local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch. Let us know if you're listening to this podcast, where you're listening to us. Give us a like and subscribe. And same thing if you're watching online on YouTube. Say hello, hi. Hopefully you're seeing all the shenanigans behind the scenes, but make sure you like and subscribe there. But more importantly, share this podcast out with your friends.
Yeah. And that little clap about Friends, that's from the Friends TV show.
I know.
When that came out years ago, our whole neighborhood would get together on Thursday nights or Friday nights, and we would watch it. And it might have been Friday nights because I think it was on Thursday, and we taped it. And so we would all clap together at that thing. But it got to this point where, you would be made fun of if you were off time or if you were late. And so everybody just sat like they weren't going to clap, and at the very last second, Well, my name is Brent Branchot. I'm the Connections pastor here at Olive Branch Church, and we would love to discuss your questions. We would love to read your feedback. So you can send that to rabbittrail@obcc.church, rabbittrail@obcc.church, and just email us your questions. It doesn't have to be on topic. We would love to discuss them for you and discuss it with one another and give it the time that it's due. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's we usually start off with a little segment here we call Brent and his terrible jokes.
Yes.
Ding.
Brent and his terrible jokes. So, here's the joke. Why was John the Baptist such a good worker? Because he was fully immersed in his job.
Well, Catholics don't think that's funny.
I was reading. I was reading
the Anglicans.
I was reading Exodus the other day, and
Baptists like that joke.
Did you realize that if the Israelites would have taken up the manna and ground it up to a powder and coated the quail with it, they would have discovered chicken McNuggets?
Wait.
Chicken nuggets. I know it's quail, but it's
Quail nuggets?
It's bird.
Where are the nuggets on the quail?
Nuggets. Yeah.
Same
place they are in the chicken.
Yeah, where's the chicken nuggets? That's actually chicken.
I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
I came across that. So.
All right.
Specialties. So
right.
I do just breaded bird is good.
Have you ever had quail?
Oh,
Yeah.
I love quail.
I've never had it. I don't think I've ever had it.
We used to
so
go quail
juicy.
hunting all the time when I was a little kid, like probably 10 years old, and then we would clean them, and I would clean them, and then we would put them on a thing and cook them over the barbecue and eat them. And I'm telling you, you got a bird that's, pretty good sized bird, like a pigeon sized bird, and you got this little breast that all you can eat, and it's about the size of a chicken McNugget. So it was a lot of
breaded with manna.
Quail McNugget.
It was a lot of work for not a whole lot of
The
meat.
only time I really had quail, it was pretty interesting. Tress was back when she would listen to what's his name? He was one of the talk show radio hosts that lives up in Washington.
Michael Medved?
Michael Medved. So Medved, we'd gone to this event and it was live, and it was like I think it was one of the presidential debates actually, and she won 2 tickets to this restaurant out in the middle of Nowheresville. We were way out in Ramona, off in some dirt road somewhere, and you pull off, and there's this guy who'd quit his career and started opening his French cuisine stuff, and we had this this amazing like honey glazed quail that was just like it was incredible.
But they are small, aren't they?
Yeah, these were good size. These are,
Really?
Yeah. Most I've seen are pretty.
What
big.
is a pheasant under glass? What is that?
Pheasant, and then they.
Do they lift the glass
Oh, I thought this was
up?
that's Stephen and his terrible jokes. What's a
Yeah.
pheasant under
No,
glass?
I mean,
what is
there's a bird called
under
a pheasant. It's a pretty big bird, and then
They bring it out in a glass and
they would bring it under like a glass,
like a
dome.
cake, thing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's not on a
You
glass.
can tell I wasn't born in the into luxury. I have
Pheasants under glass.
What's the weirdest thing? Have you ever ate snails?
I don't know. Probably I was little.
Escargot.
No, but I mean like as a food.
As a kid.
Maybe no. I don't know. Probably not. I've eaten cow tongue. That's pretty normal. I've eaten bugs.
Oh, yeah. Cow tongue's awesome.
Lots of crickets.
Lengua.
I've eaten lots of crickets in my life.
I don't like crickets.
I almost tried the mealworm. But the weirdest thing I ever
I
ate
don't
was
believe in eating the bugs.
Sagu is still the strangest thing. And I think I've already told you guys about that. Or was this like, it's basically, I was in Indonesia and it's a specialty and it was on my birthday. So they bring it out in this bowl and literally it's palm like shortening / like sap or something. And it looks like snot, like clear, glistening. It sticks, it pulls out and drips like, and you're supposed to take a soup and then you take a slurp of it and you're like, whoop, and
Does it feel like snot?
oh, it's like you've got the worst cold in your life and you just decide to eat it out of a bowl. It is, but it doesn't have any flavor. It's just the nastiest texture though. And I'm not a texture eater, so I was okay.
I think probably the most rare thing that I've probably eaten. I mean, I've eaten venison, but
Yeah, I've had
escargot, snails, and I've had alligator.
alligator.
Yeah.
Yeah, on purpose or on accident? When you're talking about eating. Oh.
Was it like Roadkill Cafe?
You know what? No, it was. We went to Florida, and there was a
Roadkill Cafe.
Yeah.
Going on, Steven. So
Yeah, I've eaten snake, I think.
Ooh.
And then I've eaten, in New Mexico, I've had like venison jerky and things like that people have made of their own. On accident, I've eaten all kinds of bugs.
chilled monkey brains. Just kidding.
But yeah. I don't know. I won't eat anything that like killed something else to eat it. You know, like I'm not going to eat bear. Some people up in New Mexico eat weird things that they caught or whatever. It's like, I probably won't eat something that's a scavenging, eating dead things, or except
Do
for
you
pig.
realize everything that eats something that was alive? Okay, so
I just don't want you eating rats.
I don't
for
like
dinner.
fungus. They eat dead things.
they do.
Yeah. Top of the
things.
I
But
don't like
even
eating top of the
deers.
chain predators. I'm not gonna eat like tiger meat.
Deer eat grass. Grass is alive. You got to kill it to eat
I
it.
only
tastes
eat-
good too, sir.
I am a herbivorist. I only eat herbivores. I'm just kidding.
Yes. But yeah, I think that's
Now,
probably the weirdest thing.
I think of that, right?
Not that I wouldn't try it. I
Carnivorously
just,
herbivore.
I'm a carnivore, right? And so when I see a big, juicy, wonderful steak and I smell that, it makes my mouth water. And it makes me wonder
like
if
bison.
like
Bison's
vegans'
good.
mouths water when somebody mows the lawn. You know?
I could take some of that grass right now.
That's for Snoop Dogg, and that's a different kind of grass
Oh,
smell.
no,
right.
that tofu smells great.
It smells like nothing.
I think I'm getting a cold, so
All
bear
right.
with me.
So there's only one comment this week, but I think it's worth talking about. So we go into the segment.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right.
This is Steven's first impressions.
This is we're talking about stepping out in obedience and serve a flawed people, like going to church. So that was the short that it was on. It says, but unfortunately, the churches, there's too much political BS. So that's what the person's comment. I was like, well, you watch that whole thing. I would really want you to watch the whole thing, because we talked a lot about the fact that churches are made with people. I'm a person. I'm flawed. They're flawed. You're going to have to deal with flawed people. And so even if you think there is all this stuff going on, I think that it's still worth God stepping out in obedience, like it says, and serve flawed people is a part of the human experience, because someone has to serve you, and you're flawed, and I'm flawed. And so when we hang out together, all kinds of flaws are everywhere.
So I took that as they meant like political BS, is like we are going to talk about like politics.
Could be. You could take it that way. I mean, it's open to that. There's too much political BS. This is, but unfortunately, the churches. So I guess, you know, wherever you go, if you went to a church that favored your politics, would you be okay with that?
It's interesting because the word politics or a political is based on the Greek word polis, the meaning people. Like it basically is just people interactions.
Yeah, it's like,
and it's the politics is how you
like, I hate the government because it's
filled
filled with people, and I'm like, well, the not government is also filled with people.
Yeah,
so
everything's political
people
in that sense. Like
so
it's not like our I get what they mean though, like a political in the sense of like, oh, you scratch my back and you're gonna grease my skids. It's like that kind of gross, slimy. But there's an honorable politic that we need to return to, where it was like debate and conversation, and then brotherhood and disagreement, these kinds of things. But
I always was under the impression that politics came from poly, meaning many, ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. That's
Brenton is terrible.
Wondering when that was coming.
Yeah, it's an old one, but it's a good one.
So for me, though, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's political with politics, like big A or big P politics, I guess, or little politics, people politicizing on each other, little P politics. Either way, that's still a human condition that deals with flawed people. There's a way to do quote unquote politics in a way that's loving and compassionate and God-fearing and God-honoring. And to avoid it, or to avoid any group of people because they're flawed, is to just be all alone and not be obedient to the scripture. So if you are a Christian, it's not a safe place for you. It's not a safe place for me. As introverted as I am, the worst places I am is when I'm totally isolated and the Lord can't speak to me through other people. And he uses flawed people. That's just what he likes to do. And that's great for me because that means I can speak and he can speak to me through other people.
And speaking isolation, that's what we're trying to deal with and not continue in this series. We want people to have friends to get out of isolation. So pass it back to you.
So again, this is from the Friends IRL in real life sermon series. And this one was like how to talk as a friend or at a friend.
Not at a friend.
As a friend.
You don't
as a
talk
friend.
at a friend.
So one of the first things that came to my mind,
it's not very nice.
In this sermon, I thought it was pretty good. But one of the things, some of the points you made, number one, you had said that friends talk and listen.
Huh?
And
what?
Yeah, friends talk and listen. So
I can only do one of those things at one time.
Yeah.
So anyway, Stephen, so I was just considering a different conversation.
Obviously, I have no friends at this table, but friends talk and listen. And so one of the things I was looking over all the points that you made, and friends talk frequently. Friends talk about what matters in your life. Talk about what you think about. Talk about what you feel. Talk about the spiritual things. Speak words of truth in love. And there was not one point in there that said anything about listening. So, you just might want to go back and adjust that sermon a little bit. But I jest because I know it was a reciprocal thing. Friends each talk about
it's interesting
these things,
that I said that friends talk and listen, and apparently you missed the entire section of my sermon.
Exactly.
That was about listening and drive-through conversations and reflective listening. You remember this?
I don't.
Really? You really weren't listening?
Well, I was talking.
Oh, okay.
So, no, and I do. I was totally joking, but I just thought it was funny that there wasn't one point on here that said listen. It was
nobody's listening to us now.
So, I know, but so some
to be quite honest, I did a lot of originally when I did the original version. I was like working through all that stuff on like what to talk about because it was important to get people topics and subjects and then of course. My wife's like, yeah, it's really important that we, it's Justin who came in and was like, yeah, I just, I thought it was really important that also you got to remember we got to listen. Maybe it was Tressa. One of those two people said this, and I was like,
one of those wise sages.
Oh, crud, I need to put listening back into the topic. So adjusted.
But, you can't help it. You're a pastor. You talk for a living. So, it's just.
You do a lot of listening, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. You hear a lot of things.
To podcasts and the Bible.
Because people want to talk to you about everything. Whether,
there's a difference between listening
they're not
and
happy,
solving people's problems too, and then listening to. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. No. That's not helpful.
No, it's
Let
not.
No corrosive talk come out of your mouths. All right.
So one of the things you said before we got on the air was that you wanted to clarify that these aren't tight compartments. These friendship things that you've been talking about.
Yeah, it's better to think of this as like like a funnel, right? If you're in the funnel of friendship, the broadest end of the funnel is that huge giant kind of crowd, and then you go down in the funnel. It's not like you're leaving these. It's not like, oh, look, I'm out of the funnel. I'm no longer friends. I don't have to have activities if I'm hanging out, if I'm talking to my true friend. It's like, no, you still need to be part of the whole overarching tribe. You're not going to stop going to church because now you've got a team to hang out with. And you're not going to stop hanging out with your team once you've got a true friend. No, your true friend is still part of the team. That team is still part of that larger tribe. That tribe is part of that larger crowd. And so otherwise you end up doing the bad thing I've been saying, which is codependency. You're literally isolating yourself with your friend. Don't do that. If you've been hearing me saying that these are compartments that you move your friends out of and then you don't continue in the other zones, you're going to end up with broken friendships. That's not helpful. Keep doing activities. Stay in the bigger tribe and, go to the church, go to the service, connect with your friends, with other people around, and be very hospitable to one another. Be very open and inviting to other people. Otherwise, your friendships will become myopic, and you'll just have one person that you talk to all the time. That's not healthy. That's not what we're talking about here.
And part of it is kind of like, you've done sermons and talked about, our Christian life and the church life, and theology in that regard too, is just, there's the shallow end, there's the middle end, and then there's the deep end. And with relationships and friendships too, that's kind of, on the shallow end, you can have a lot of friends, but as you get deeper and deeper, that there's fewer and fewer friends. And
right. It's it's the number that you can sustain right. with that level of intimacy. You can have more people at a hangout level than you can at the true deep friend level. And you can have way more people where you're not at the acquaintance level than even the team level where you're doing stuff together. Like, we've done game nights, and like one of the hard things is games are designed for 4 to 6 people typically, and unless you're doing a party game. And a party game is a very different kind of game because it's not the same level of engagement and stuff. And so you can only sustain so many people doing certain things at certain levels. So it's just kind of, those are not compartments. They're kind of amounts that you can carry. So, okay. And they stay in those other areas. So.
Again, you were talking about, true friends talk frequently. They talk about what they think. They talk about what they feel. They talk about spiritual life. They talk about truth. What if I don't have anything to talk about?
No.
You mean you?
Yeah, you kind of even talked about it like in the sermon. It was just like, you're that 13-year-old teenage boy. How was school? Mm-hmm. How did you enjoy that? What if I just don't have anything to say?
Oh.
Doesn't make for good radio.
I don't know. You try it, Stephen. What do you think? If somebody didn't know how to talk.
Oh, you don't mean that.
There you go. See, it works good.
Yeah. If someone doesn't want to learn to talk, it depends on, if you never have talks with people that you care about that are close to you, that's a problem. If you overly share with everyone, even if they're not that close to you, that's also a problem. Hey. So the idea is, to me, that somewhere in your life, you need to learn to communicate the feelings that you have that are going on internally to someone outside of your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And it's healthy to have the ability to use your words to do that. And if you don't practice them, especially as a teenager, communicating, as a male teenager, I guess, communicating, then you're going to have a harder problem in your relationships when they really do matter and you're feeling things and you can't describe them, and then they build up inside of you, and then you end up blowing up or just doing irrational things that no one knows why you're doing it.
You don't even know why you're doing it.
You don't even know. You just know that you're responding to what's going on the inside. And that's because at a point in your life, a lot of people, they learn to develop. They don't understand. You get more complex emotions than you did when you were a kid. As a kid, you're like, I like this, I don't like this. As you get older, you're like, I feel ambivalence. Like, I kind of like this, but I kind of hate this. And you don't know how to say that. And so if you don't have someone to talk through. Or
you can have two competing emotions at the same time.
At the same time. And so you start having these very complex emotions. You need to have someone wise in your life that can guide you, but also the peer groups you choose should also help you be able to communicate at least what you're both currently experiencing. So
I just want to also say that if you find that you there's two routes, right? If you don't have anything to talk about, sometimes it's because you believe, if I talk about this, my friends are really not going to be interested in it. But if you're friends, you already have something that you're both interested in. It may be Jesus. It may be that team that you're in. You've probably met that person because you're both into something. As C.S. Lewis says, your comrades, your companions in life are those people that say, you think about that too? You like little bottled waters like I do? Whatever.
That's an odd habit.
That was odd. Yeah. So it's like, basically people are like, oh, I'm into quilting. You're into quilting. Oh, you like detective mystery games? I like detective mystery games. You like solving strange coded puzzles that can't be solved? I don't like that either. So it's like, whatever. Sometimes,
or for us with the murder solving games, right? I mean, one thing that I think is fun doing it with you guys is you love to crack codes. I hate to crack codes.
Right.
I like the storyline, and Stephen likes to find out what kind of code it is. He breaks that, and then you solve the code, and then we all work together. So,
but we're all interested in the game.
We're all interested in the game.
So and it's a cooperative game, so we have fun. Like I have fun with another friend of mine in games when they're super competitive, because I'm a competitive person and he's competitive. So me and Andy like to compete against each other when we're playing a game.
That's how I win.
And
when they compete against each other, I slip in and win.
Yeah,
this is true.
It's really irritating.
He and Teresa,
the only way I'm going to win is to let
he
them
and Teresa are
other.
very competitive, and so they always liked Settlers of Catan. And so Nancy and I would come over, and we hadn't played in a year. Every time we go over there to play, so we're kind of trying to figure out the game, and we just realized too, if we just sit back. They don't want each other to win, and they will hurt each other, and we can sneak in and possibly win the game. So.
Yep, it works. Good strategy.
I will say Nancy and I are that competitive.
So my idea is that I would say that there's some people who are going to struggle with knowing what to say because they think my friends don't like games. They don't want to hear me talk about games, and that can be true. I think still go ahead and share it, because sometimes when we like a person, they can get us interested in things that we're not normally interested in. Right? They can get us, oh, I've never thought about that. I check that out. That's kind of interesting. I didn't know. Like, I mean, honest, like I'd never gone to Shakespeare before or watched a Shakespeare play, even at school. And then Stephen was like, hey, they've got, I think it was
Macbeth
being done out in Pasadena. He's like, come with me. And I'm like, okay. It was this cool in the round thing, and it was a blast because he shared the history of the story and what was going on and stuff like that he had learned. And so he made something that maybe I wasn't going to naturally be immediately interested in into something that was actually, whoa, this is cool. I'm more interested than I ever was before. And so I think it's important that if you have a friend, to share the portions of your life that even if it's a risk that they may not like it. The second thing, though, is that if you really are just sitting there and you don't have anything to talk about, go get some new interests. Like if you're stuck in the same rut you've been in since high school, or I just go home. I mean, I had a friend who was a very interesting guy. He had lots of interests that he was into in school, and he was, he would talk about different things. And by the time we were both 35, I went to his house one day and I'm like, so have you read anything? What are you into? He's like, dude, I go to work and I come home and watch the Dodgers. That was his whole life at that point. Like, he'd talk about his kids or whatnot, but pretty much that was it. Like, if you didn't...
the Dodgers were having a down year.
Oh, they were in the horrible years, right? It was that horrible time period. And they were... And so it was just kind of like, to me, I was like, this is so sad. Like, what happened to my friend that used to be interested in all these science things and all these, like, nothing. He had nothing to talk about. And I was just so depressed. And I don't think Christians should have that. You have a whole world out there of God's creation that he invites you to explore so you can know him and be fascinated by him. Like, go on a hike, go see something, open your eyes, get out of your computer screen, whatever it is, throw your phone in a trash can and go see the wondrous world around you beyond a political world, and go have some great conversations. I would just encourage people, if you find that you don't have something to talk about, whatever you're doing, drop it and go start living some life. Now, obviously, that's not our podcast because you guys are listening to three guys have conversations.
Don't turn us off.
And you're interested. No, our
go live life in another half an hour.
Like our our people are probably dealing with other people who are like, they don't want to talk to me. They don't have anything to talk to me about. What would you do in those cases? Say you're married to somebody and you've been married and their interests have just fallen off while yours have grown, and you're just like, I'm the one always talking. They don't have anything to talk to me about. What would you do? What would you advise to that person in a friendship or a marriage?
I would say, number one, ask questions, draw a conversation out of them, show that you're interested in them too. But I don't know. I think asking questions would probably be the best way to try to generate some conversation and find out, something about them that you can help direct them to other interests. What say you, Stephen?
Someone's in your personal life and they just don't want to talk to you?
Well, it's not that they don't want to. They just,
they're not a talkative person.
They're not a talkative person. They've got one thing they're interested in. It's just that one thing. And you're married to them, or you are their friend, and you're like, I'm the one who's talking all the time.
And I would say, though, too, sometimes it's just a season, so be patient with that, too. Like, one thing that comes to my mind is my grandson, Tucker, When he was little, we were really close. We talked, we shared things, had a great time together. And then when he got like 12, 13, he just got very bah humbug. He's a teenager. He doesn't want to talk. And then when he started hitting like 15, 16, he kind of came out of that shell. And then his senior year in high school and part of his junior year, he had to be dropped off early, and so we had one-on-one time. And so we would start going through books together and have conversations. And that part of it, too, I think, was he realized that he could be more transparent with me and felt safer, and it created more conversation. And he is a completely different person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. How about you, Stephen? You were going to talk until you're so rudely interrupted.
Yeah.
No, I think it depends on, again, the season of life and the person's in. But I think you're going to, if it's family or something like that, it's more of a difficult challenge. If you married that, then I do feel that's a different choice decision that you made, because you have to grow in your compatibility. But if you care about someone, you're going to keep trying to interact with them if they're in your life. So there are people that are young and they go through the teenage years. With my family, I'm never going to stop trying to introduce you to new things. It's just going to be a part of our relationship. And if you're going to say, I don't want to do anything, I'm going to keep trying to present things in the hopes that you'll want to engage me. And then I might do what you do, what you like, engage you in that for a period of time, and then hope it's reciprocal. If it's never reciprocal, then you really don't care about anyone else but
it's
yourself.
Not reciprocal. There's more going on than conversation.
I can't stand baseball, but I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to baseball games because I have friends and other people like things. And there are a lot of things I don't like that a lot of people do like, and I have to engage them in where they're at in order for them to see the value of wanting to try out anything that I like to do. And if someone's completely unwilling to do that, then they are stuck in a period of what I call selfishness, because that isn't how human beings are designed, to just do one thing and sit there and never interact with other human beings. That's unhealthy for you. So if it's a kid or a parent, that's where it becomes more worrisome. But you have the authority in that situation to go, no, come on, like my dad was, no, come on, we're going to go hiking, whether you like it or not. And I'm going to expose you to things because I know better than you do about what you need. Or go outside, ride your bike. I don't care whether you want to or not. You've been sitting all day long. So that's different because it's a different kind of relationship. I think if you're in a dating relationship and you get to that point, I wouldn't proceed farther until that person comes out of that slump, because every activity cannot just be centered on one individual's interests. It has to be a mutually shared, at least agreement that we don't like the same things. We don't have to. But if you respect mine and I respect yours, through you, I can enjoy an activity.
Are there psychological or even genetic things that people have that can cause them to be less communicative, like in those cases?
Yes. Obviously, things like any IQ impairments, any kind of things like that. And that might be an equally yoked situation. There are people that just don't have as many interests as others. Then I would suggest you find someone that has very similar interests to you that you can share, so long as you're not focused on the narcissism that comes, so that the world needs to come to me where I'm at. And the fear that I have isn't really necessarily a psychological condition, but a character development of a nation that said, I sit at a desk and everything in the world comes to me, that has really done a number on our ability to deal with boredom, to deal with things that are necessary in order to sustain friendships. Because it's all friendships are only as good as my own interest, my own entertainment, my own consumption. And if that's the way you look at friendships, like I said, one of the books I was reading, that kids will text, adults will do this now, 10 people, and the first one they're like, I don't really like that guy as much as number 3. So they were waiting for the other text to come through. Whereas when you were younger, you didn't have that option. You either had to hang out with the neighborhood kids or not play. And so you learn to get along with people. And what they find is that people learned better interactive skills and end up having stronger friendships because they had to work through adversity. We need to almost now in our culture add adversities of interest in order to get ourselves out of our own ruts or slumps. I know this because, like, for me, I'm an introvert. And I was a really strong introvert, and I'm not, to this day, I'm still not as interested into things as most people are. But what I realized is I'm not probably sorry to say this, I'm never probably going to like the Steelers, but I am fascinating as to when did it happen for you what memories caused you to like the Steelers, and you've talked to me about family, and then like, okay, that's similar to my interest in Star Trek. I used to sit with my dad. And now we have a human experience, but different interests. I was like, oh, your nerd thing is sports. My nerd thing is the typical nerd thing.
I just want to point out, sports is not nerdy. Okay, so Star Trek is nerdy. Sports are cool.
At a Star Trek convention, they dress up wearing funny costumes. Yeah. They never do that at sports events, right?
No.
Never wear cheese on their head?
Yeah. Cheese or paint themselves half black and gold.
They don't ever cosplay either. They don't wear somebody else's jersey with their number and go to church in it. You know what's different about sports nerds versus normal nerds? Nobody cosplays at church. Sports people cosplay at church all the time. Walk in with the jerseys.
Star Wars t-shirts on.
That's not cosplay. They're not dressed up as the person that they're supposed to be representing. You literally wear their jersey. That's
my favorite thing is like, I have never watched a Star Wars movie and I was like, I hope the good guys win because I'm on their team. But I have some people think that they're on the team, like, we're going to win this day. I was like, I don't think you're playing, but okay.
I will say, I have grown up since then, but it used to affect me. It affected my mood when the Steelers lost. And I remember, like, in the playoffs, and they'd get knocked out early. And I just was, part of it is like, I don't get to watch them again for another year, but I almost had this feeling like, dang it, I care more about winning than you do.
Well, that's how I feel.
And I realized, okay, something is wrong here because
that's how you feel about producers.
That's exactly how I feel about when you make a bad Star Wars film. Yeah. I have to wait a whole other year to see if you're going to fix this mess, and the disappointment and the frustration and the investment.
They're really having a bad season.
Yeah, they're on a
decade. Low bad season.
But what I'm saying is what it did is it opened me up. Other people are like me, just in different ways. Yeah. We don't have the same passions, but we're human beings responding to the things that we like, and we need to be respectful of those things. And sometimes that's easier. That makes you, okay, now what are the things we do have in common? So it's working through those difficulties that I've found broaden my ability. I learned this at not a Blockbuster, but at a mailbox, etc. I think it was my dad or someone took me aside, like, no one's going to care about what you want to talk about in small talk unless you care about what they think. And I go, but all they do is talk about the weather. Watch, keep talking to them about the weather, and after like a month, they'll want to talk to you about something else. And so what I realized is I thought it was like stupid to talk about the weather because the weather you can't control, but that made them feel comfortable with me. Like, this is the only common experience we have. Let's talk about that. And then I realized, then they started opening up because they feel like I'm a safe person to talk to. I'm relating to what they want to talk about. And what you're looking for is someone that has the maturity to reciprocate that.
So that's super interesting because being somebody who's not real great at small talk personally,
I used to hate it. I still it's still difficult.
But I want to go back to this real quick. So put a pin in that real fast because I don't want to lose that because that leads to a different question that I was thinking about. But I do want to say that there's a book out there that we read years ago. It's Harvey's Laws or whatever. He's kind of funny. It was about like how to fair-proof your marriage or something like that. And he would argue that if there's a case like, hey, we're into your spouse or your friend, in this case, that would be a friend, but we're talking about spouses as well. Mainly, if they don't want to talk about something, what are they interested in? Go become interested in that.
Yeah.
Go invest or sacrifice one of your interests for the sake of the other person's interest. But eventually, like you said, they've got to open up. Now, you've got in the ocean test, you've got people who are open to new experiences. So people who don't know what the ocean test is, real quick, it's a 5-factor psychology analysis. of kind of factors of personality that are based not on like, hey, this is your personality type. It's literally on statistical analysis of the way humanity across the globe has looked at people. So
it's also a 15-minute worship song.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oceans. Yes.
15 minutes.
Open to new experiences. See us being conscientious. You're either more open
Introvert
or
extrovert.
Introvert, extrovert, agreeableness, and then
Neuroticism.
Being how much you expose your emotions or not. So, would you find that openness leads to more talkativeness, or agreeable, disagreeable?
It depends. There's people that are
or
open.
Extrovert, introvert.
Yeah, it's really the extrovert and introvert that's going to determine whether you want to talk to anyone all the time and you get a sense of fuel from doing that. The introversion, if you have like extroversion and you have openness to new experience, those are going to be people that are kind of wanting to explore the whole world. They kind of have the wanderlust, or they want to know everything and hang out with everybody, and they're kind of drawn to theater in my experience, because theater draws both introverts and extroverts
and neurotics
and neurotic people. So I do think it's good to be aware of the energy level at which what happens when you're in a crowd. But I find that people are, especially when it comes to introverts and extroverts, very adjustable depending on the people that they're interacting with. So I would say if you take a bunch of introverts and you put them in a room, eventually they're going to bell curve and there's going to be extroverts, because their all interests are very similar and the way they approach people is similar. So what they're finding, though, is in the research is that people who are introverted typically take stimuli in stronger than people who don't. Now, that doesn't sound like it means anything. It just means that when people talk to them, or sounds, or physiologically, it affects them more, and they have to put it they have to process it or have some distance from it until they feel safe. They find that that's not the reaction that a lot of extroverts have. They feel very comfortable in a group of people. There's no stimuli overload. And so that's helpful to know if you're in that situation, that you need to overcome that, because in order to be functional in life, you have to be willing to be able to sacrifice, even if it's not your norm. So the idea that the problem with personality tests is they sometimes excuse your inability to grow.
Yeah.
So once you are something, it's I told you what I am, and so you just have to accept it. I'm like, no. Everybody's called to do things they're uncomfortable with in their personality. It's not about you. It's about what needs to be done to do good things.
I'm naturally disorganized. Well, good luck holding a job. You better learn how.
Well, in protecting your family, you might not be naturally aggressive, but that calls for you to be aggressive, whether you like it or not. And there are things in life and God's one of those things, that calls you out of your comfort zones. And he particularly likes to use people. I know you're weak in this. Watch how much you have to hold on to me before you. If you're afraid of friends, you're gonna have to hold on to me.
Speaking about being afraid and small talk and being afraid and like weaknesses, like, okay, back to the small talk thing. Like you're talking about, your dad was teaching you. I'll talk about the weather. Small talk, like so. This is critical because I think a lot of people, maybe not our audience, I don't know, but I do think that we all know people who struggle with small talk or struggle with the art of conversation. Do you believe that the art of conversation is dead?
I had just written that down here too, and when I asked that question about if you don't have anything to talk about, can you grow in that? And is conversation an art form? And I do think that yes to both of those. I do think it is something you can learn and you can practice and you can become proficient in.
You know what else?
And that's
is an art form? Musicals.
I know.
And it is all a musical. I tell you now. I'm just kidding.
Yes,
I said to insult you.
That is art. I guess some people's minds, musicals are art.
I know musicals are on the. I'm just kidding.
Yes, but
it's an art form.
I will say, heaven is going to be where everything is in its
perfect order. A musical,
everything is in its perfect order. Hell is where people will be singing the life.
Wait, that is absolute heresy, and you need to repent now, because I'm sorry, you get to just read Revelation. Everybody starts breaking out in songs, Brent.
There's a difference between people breaking out in songs and musicals. Okay. Musicals, people are bringing out in songs for no reason at all. It's just mere stupidity.
Like in the Muppets Christmas Carol.
That's an amazing musical, though.
Okay, I just need to say that.
So, but I do think it is an art form in that sense that you can practice it, you can grow in it, and you can cultivate it and learn and be proficient in it. And I do think we have to have a desire to grow if we want to grow. I mean, anything you want to be better at is going to take intentionality, focus, and work.
Yeah. And I don't think the goal is to be extroverted either. I think the goal is to allow God to use you in any capacity, whether it's your weakness or your strength. So if you're good at it and you really like to be around people, you're going to have to really focus in on how to deal with one individual if you're ever going to have an intimate relationship with them or a close friendship. Because if everybody's your friend, then are you really close to anyone?
No, you just said, if you want to be close to people. And then those people that don't really have anything to say, I don't really care about being close to people. But I do think we are created to be close to people and to be in community.
It's not all at one time.
Do you feel like that's more of just a cop-out because they don't want to do the work and do the investment? And so I think they just talk themselves into I don't really need people or want people?
No, we'll deal with this next week in the sermon.
Yeah, I do think that has a lot to do with the pain that caused.
Or not this weekend, but the next week after that. Yeah, and I believe that they've given into the fear.
Oh, I'm just talking from an introvert. Like for me, it's painful to talk to people, or it was when I was younger. It's not so much anymore. I wasn't even shy. Most people are shy, so that's painful for them as well. But for me, it's it takes a lot to focus on someone else, and there's a fear that I might hurt their feelings or not do it right.
Is that introvert or is that narcissism?
Probably both of those things.
I think that,
but there's a fear of looking stupid or hurting someone or
having
to be embarrassed.
Fears. I think it's all fear. It's a very deep fear of rejection.
That's another one.
And all of those rejection. Are circling under that. Why I'm afraid to look stupid or be embarrassed is because I'm rejecting myself.
Some people should have a little more fear.
Yeah.
Have some shame. You were looking at me when you said that.
Have some shame.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I get it.
But you did agree that the art of conversation is kind of dead, though. Before
I do agree that the art of conversation is dead for a couple of reasons. One, I think consumerism. The other is technology has given us the illusion that just because we can talk to anyone at any time, that we don't have to learn how to do that. Because I can say K, yup, and a text or an emoji. So the art of being able to really fine-tune your speech and communicate clearly what you're feeling and thinking, it's almost like, no, I don't have to do that. You just have to understand me. So in a world that says, I'm me-focused, makes everyone else have to learn you instead of you having to learn how to deal with people that are different from yourself. It's actually easier to learn how to deal with people different from yourself than it is making everyone in the world try to accommodate you.
So you're saying that because they're not willing to dig in. They're not willing to ask that question.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you don't respect who I am, and if you don't like what I like, then the heck with you, right? I mean, there's even songs that say if love songs are kind of like, you better love me the way I am, and I'm like, no one should have to do that. No one. Like, why do people have to love you the way you are, and everything that you do to them is just acceptable? That's not appropriate for any relation. I would not encourage anyone to do that. Why would you do that? So there's these songs that just are all me focused. And when everybody thinks that way, no one's going to get connected because everybody thinks that everybody has to come to them where they're at instead of having to grow to be close to someone because they're not you. If they're just like you, then it's just like you wouldn't have to work at anything. You wouldn't grow and mature. And I feel like relationships are placed in our lives to show us both our strengths and our flaws. So to go closer to the Lord.
How would you help so your dad's teaching you like, hey, talk about the weather? And
I didn't believe him at first. So I had to practice that. So he's like, just trust me. Just ask them how they're doing and be sincere about it.
Because his job, he had to make friends. He had to go into places and make friends with people, right?
People had to trust you to ship things to their loved ones or tell you things or hold their mail. I know it sounds weird, but we worked in the entertainment industry, so a lot of it is based on people in the entertainment industry had their boxes with us, comedians and actors and producers. And I liked all that stuff, but I could never, why don't they ever want to talk about art? They're like, because they don't know you. And so what's a safe conversation that you build a trust with somebody long enough where they will want to have a casual conversation is to make them shallower, meaningful conversations. I know it sounds like a negative, in order for them to build trust. So you have to care about them where they're at long enough for them to want to reciprocate. And if they want to reciprocate, then you know that they're the kind of people that want to have a conversation. So it's kind of a journey. Not everyone's going to do that with you. Some people are going to want to keep that shallow, but now you know that. Okay, this person never wants to talk about anything. This is the arrangement that he's interested in. Hey, how you doing? Great. I hope you have a great day. You know, and I really want them to have a great day, because you're saying the same thing over and over again to people. Hope you have a great day. But it's like, hey, Bob. So I'm trying to remember your name, and then I'm like, hey, have a great day, man. I hope you have a good one. And then they're like, oh, that guy remembered my name. And it's like, that's a small thing, but it started with being aware of who this person is. So that made it meaningful. So I had to find a way to make small talk meaningful. And I am going to try. I still need to practice it, because I still have my tendencies as an introvert to fall back on just thinking internally. My thoughts are in my own head. I'm not really paying attention where I'm at. I'm more thinking on something else. And so I have to pray oftentimes in the morning, like, help me care where I'm at and care who's around me, especially as the outreach person. I got to stop thinking about what I want to think about and focus on where God's placed me at the moment. So that helps a little bit. It's still a challenge, but I think it's helped me grow.
There is actually information on the art of conversation. Like, Jesus was an incredible conversationalist in the sense that you don't see his conversations necessarily all the time, but I think that's why people love when he's talking to the woman at the well.
At the well is a good one. It's amazing, just because you're like, what do you go to a well for? Water. Why wouldn't that be the start of your conversation? Oh, I'm thirsty. Oh, cool. Okay, so can you give me some water? That it didn't start like, do you know that you're a sinner and you're living with it would have been a really awkward moment. But just the brilliance of God being in the moment with a person, watching what they're doing, and they're aware of who they are. Oh, you're a Jew, and you're a Samaritan. Yeah, I noticed. You know, so I just think it's a brilliant way to look at how God views the situation. And then he's sharing, they're sharing, she shares, then he shares, then he tells her because he loves her, he want to tell her the truth. This is what's happening. No disrespect on his part. She was like, oh my gosh, you do know me. You were listening to me. You did care about me. Yeah, I came all this way knowing I was going to have this encounter, and you're here now, and we're going to talk. And
it's similar, like with the disciples when he called them. He was like walking along on the shore, and he's like, "Hey, you guys, take me out. Let's go fishing." They kind of know who he is. They know he's a teacher. They've heard him at synagogue and stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, cast it off on the right side." And they're just like, "Come on, really?" And then they do it, and suddenly they're just like and Jesus just kind of engages their world before he makes them step into his world. And it's just, there is a lot to learn in those simple little steps like that. So,
I think part of too, and when it comes to conversation, whether it be small talk or deeper conversation, and the art form behind it, is learning to converse more than just words, tonality, body language, language, social cues, and not just listening, but kind of taking it all in will help you become a better listener and conversationist. But one of the passages Greg brought up was, "Let no corrupt talk come out of your mouth, but only such that is good for building up, that it may give grace." And I just want to preface that by saying that that doesn't mean it has to be all hearts and flower talk. Corrective talk, saying some hard things to people sometimes, is for the purpose of building them up. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't all have to be nice talk. But when it comes to intimacy and relationships, and let there be no corrupt talk or whatever, joking around and teasing people and insulting people, in a loving, safe relationship. You said it earlier before we went on, and I have said it before. If I'm not teasing you, I don't care about you. I tease the ones that I love. So what say you about is there a place for that? And is there
teasing people?
Let me say, is there a healthy place for that?
Yeah, no, I think for me, I've learned over the years that if you're going to survive like a meal with my family, you're going to probably take a lot of ribbing, or they're just going to be quiet there because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So that's kind of depending on your family of origin. There's a lot of kind of joking around with people, but I don't think that people take that wrong in our family. I think everybody knows that is the way we're communicating and caring. So Lily learned this because my dad can be more on the harsher side than the rest of us, but he was teasing her, and she's like, oh, and then I could see when the light bulb went on. Oh, he's teasing me because he cares about me. She goes, oh, that's just you. And right away, he's like, oh, she's already figured out who you are. And she felt loved, like, okay, you only do that to people you like. And it clicked in her head that we're teasing, but we're not meaning anything deeper than that. And so once she understood that, then it was like, okay, now I can tease you. And so you see this kind of mutual bond, because the idea is that I see your flaws, but I still love you, is the impression that you get. And so if you make a mistake, we don't want to pretend like it didn't happen, but we still love you. And if you do that, it's kind of brings humor to the situation. If we all had to say the perfect thing and it was like on nails, and if you said anything wrong, everybody just beat you down, and even if it was joking, it's not uplifting. It's not like we're getting closer. It's actually harsher. So I have been in families where they tear you down, and they do it because it makes them feel better. And that's not what I'm talking about. It's really just poking fun at the idiosyncrasies, so you're aware of yourself, but you know that you're still loved.
I think this is what you see when Jesus is kind of naming the disciples, right? In some ways, like he calls the John and James sons of thunder. And it's like, and what is the one event we know about? They're like, whoa, the Samaritans, we call down fire from heaven. It's like, you two are a bunch of thunder. You're not lightning. You're not the sons of lightning. You're not bringing the fire down. You're the sons of thunder. A lot of thunder here, guys.
A lot of blustering.
A lot of blustering going. And I do think there's some of this, like, little bit of ribbing that he's given them, like, but ultimately,
Peter the Rock, who kind of just lets his emotions take him everywhere.
You weeble wobble. Right, but and so that's interesting. In our family, we do a little, fun jesting and ribbing, but the danger is that we've got a specialty in my family, which is the capacity to know exactly the thing that hurts you and then to hit it hard because you think you're joking. I don't think that's okay. Personally, I don't find that to be a healthy thing in a family. If you're actually going to hit the real thing that you know somebody's hurting, like if I just started going after your guys' weaknesses, your true weaknesses, in almost a semi-vicious manner, you'd be like, why are you picking on that? Like, you kind of know that hurts. You know that's like something I don't like, and you know that kind of hurts me. I don't think we would interpret that as kind. Continually prod at the core of who you are in a negative manner. Like and they don't mean it in a way to build you up. They mean it in a way to just either make themselves feel better. Like I had a lot of that done to me in high school. So I have a very sensitive space in this zone for myself, sitting in buses, having people literally pick me apart in front of everybody else for the sake that this popular kid could feel even more popular amongst his friends. In the meantime, I would have times where I was just hanging out with my friends, and then they would take hold of those things. And because they felt uncomfortable, just zero in on my oddity, make fun of it, nail it, just because they knew it would get my goad. And it was like, oh man, it was cruel. It wasn't kind. It wasn't friendship, even though they claimed they were friends. It was a very vicious situation. And I think that's what it's getting at. I don't think it's getting at this kindly ribbing, like, hey, we're part of the same family. I think that's natural and normal within a community to enjoy each other and kind of poke at each other and just, knowing that, hey, I love you. I don't actually dislike you. And sometimes you may use it as a rebuke, and that's fine. Yeah. But these are not rebuking situations. These are the situations that are intended to dissolve it. Yeah. And so that to me is like, that's what I would call the difference between ribbing and bagging. Like bagging on somebody.
I grew up with both.
is right. It doesn't mean it's good though, just because you grow up with it and you can handle it.
I mean, it might make you feel like you have this skill of being able to cut people down and up. I don't know why that gave a lot of people pride, but I think amongst where I grew up, it's pretty common because people are all poor and they feel bad and ashamed. And one way to feel good is to shame other people. And
I think one reason why it makes people feel good is because
it's clever.
Because I think that everybody uses a perceived strength of theirs to cut people down, whether it be your intelligence, whether it be your comedic talent, or whether it be, you use those, and I think that when God gifts us with something, we can use it for the good and we can use it as a destructive
Absolutely.
weapon. And
I think
and that's where I need to be careful, because I know that my wit can turn into unhealthy sarcasm, and I do know that I have to be cognizant and aware that I'm not crossing that line or using it as a weapon rather than using truth. But I also, it is a tool of acceptance too, and it was a good teaching moment for especially my grandkids, where they would get so offended if somebody teased them, or if I teased them, and I would always like stop and go, do you believe that I believe that?
Yeah, that's usually where the
and
conversation
they were like,
goes.
No, or I don't know.
Why
and
do you
I'm
care?
like, I love you. Do you believe that about yourself? No. Then why do you let it bother you? And having those conversations with them to kind of toughen their skin. I would never say that to you in an audience like this if I really was serious. And so it's done that. And I mean, you can see it in our culture today too, where people want acceptance, And in this culture, there are certain people or people groups or whatever that demand acceptance and equal treatment in society. And then when it comes to comedians, it's like they're off limits. So it's kind of like if you want them embedded into our society and accepted it, then if I'm making fun of everything else and not making fun of them, doesn't that make them not the norm, And so I do think that comedy sometimes shows acceptance, if that makes sense.
I was watching a particular comedian on Dry Bar, and he was talking about this blind guy, and he was just kind of throwing out jokes, making fun of him a little bit, and the guy's laughing his head off, and he's like, and he was facing the wrong way, he said, but he was still laughing. But then this lady in the back goes, I'm offended. Like, you're making fun of, he's blind. I'm offended for him. And he's like, do you know this lady? Is this, am I being offensive? He's like, and then he goes, the blind guy goes, I've never seen her before in my entire life. and basically he came up after the show. He's like, thank you. Usually people ignore me. You put me into the show. It felt so included.
Yeah.
It was so great. It was like, and his point was like, guys, calm down. It was like right at that beginning point of all of that kind of hyper activity around.
And that's part of that thing, It's just, okay, I know I'm blind. I know I've got this problem, but I want to be thought of as just like everybody else.
Or do you want to be treated extra special because of your weaknesses?
And I do think part of it is, one of the segments of comedy is tragedy plus time equals comedy, right? And so for me, even losing my hair, I can joke about it now, but when I was losing it, it wasn't a funny topic.
Like that's all too soon.
Yeah, too soon. It was too soon 5 years ago, but now I'm okay with it.
Hey,
it's too soon for him.
I wouldn't be okay with it if I didn't have such a beautiful head, but
it is like a light bulb.
It is like a light bulb.
It's so round and shiny. No, the other part then is corrosive. Like the corrosive portion was the coarse joking,
mm-hmm.
And when I talk about it, I'm talking about like this is where I wish Tressa had been here for this part of the conversation. Like I really do believe there's a place at which men have a tendency to get together, and when we're alone, we can degrade women with our humor. Using often, and I've seen it over and over and over again in my life. It's actually,
and not just because you're trying to include them.
No, not because we're trying to. They're not there. But using their, speaking them as if they're body parts or whatever, or this sexualized, disgusting. In my opinion, I would call that what this is talking about. Coarse jesting. It literally is body or the terminology there is just a obscene, coarse jesting, and this coarse joking, jokes that, and this is that kind of stuff that's just like, there's just the Bible's, the words were that obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse jesting, which are not proper, but rather for thanksgiving, they shouldn't even be named among you, is this idea. And that's hard because I think some people are like, whoa, that's the only jokes I've got, they're the funniest jokes. I've known people who are like, it's just how if there are funny things, we talk about funny things all the time. We don't have to be like dirty and cussing and dropping F-bombs or like sounding like I don't know, sailors or whatever. It's just that I guess sailors talk really bad. Truck drivers? I don't know. Something like that.
Military members in
high
general.
school students. So it is an interesting thing because we were talking about like the wisdom involved in like, do you laugh at that? Do you not laugh at that? Like you're in a group of guys, everybody's laughing. And I like how you put it, Stephen, that there's this tendency to go, well, that's funny, but it's not good.
Yeah, I think there's this tendency to say, and there are times, depending on the humor, where it is kind of disgusting, or you feel that sense of, oh, that's inappropriate.
That's objectification.
But sometimes it can be funny and still not good. And I think as Christians, we need to acknowledge something could bring humor because it's clever and still be harmful. And you have to acknowledge, yeah, that's clever, but it isn't good or beneficial. And to be okay with that ambiguity, I'm not saying what you're doing and saying has a good outcome. I'm saying, oh, that's clever, but that's not appropriate. Or it's hurting somebody. And it often is in the context of what you're saying it is and how you're saying it and who you're saying it to. But also just what does that do to you as a person? So even if you're able to do it constantly, if it's a constant part of your conversation, then I would ask the question, how do you view women without objectifying them? So in the military, what happens when guys think that they're alone? It's always the guy who wants to give me the racial joke and some of these things I might have a halt tolerance, but it's not so much that you're just doing it to try and get me to laugh. It's just that this is comfortable for you. Mm-hmm. And you don't feel any sense of uncomfortability about it. That would concern me because it's doing something to you.
But part of that too, I think, is if I had a black friend or if I had you, a Mexican friend, and I was more immature, I would feel like if I can make racial jokes to you, that showed acceptance and it showed a lack of racism and a lack of bigotry. If I could say that to you, and we could laugh,
because everybody in the room would know you don't mean it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you feel that way about the opposite sex conversations?
I don't feel that way about the racial jokes anymore.
So
that was back when I was, when in high school or whatever, and so now I would just like, it's not appropriate. And again, I have always been a joker my whole life. And when I gave my life to the Lord, one of the things that I was really into, and it was taboo now, is sexual oriented jokes, and it doesn't have to be derogatory about women. It could just be a sexual oriented joke. And I cringe. I rarely ever even snicker a little bit. And that is the one thing, like, I don't go there. And I do that with movies too, where, if I'm going to watch an R-rated movie, I check and I'm like, okay, is there nudity and all this stuff? Because I don't want to go there. And
I think though, if you, I don't know. So there's a part of this that I'm curious about. I have questions. So I'll give you a for instance, that could be considered body, but not intentionally. So I'm preaching and I'm talking about how Christians are all bricks in the wall, but I started that sentence with a P, right? And so everyone in the room was like looking around, and I was like, yes, I said it. Yes, it was odd, and now I feel uncomfortable. Everybody laughed.
But you said it by accident.
I didn't say it on purpose,
okay.
But it's like to act like it didn't happen and to just go on,
right,
even though it sounds inappropriate, it wasn't my intent. I think intent is important as well. And so the intent of my mind, well, it could be, I guess, if you're in therapy, if you're saying it and it's happening all the time. But the intent at the time wasn't to say, like, let's be crass on the stage for God. So I do think there is a context to these things, and motives need to be attributed. Right. What I'm comfortable with in humor is always being, if you're going to do humor, you have to be willing to deal with people who come up and attack you for your motives. I'm okay with that. It's like, if I'm going to say something funny, you have the right to say, well, where's your heart with that? So fine, but you have to also say, are you taking it too sensitive?
So let me put it, I think that the importance is that there's a lot of things that are getting mixed up in our jokes, like in that people, like, for example, there can be stereotypes that are not wrong and that are not unfunny and they're not racist. Yeah. Like if you're talking about somebody's language and the language is funny, like there used to be the joke as a kid where some guy grabs the cheese and some Hispanic guy's running after him going, that's not your cheese, man. That's not your cheese. Like that's a joke with language. Like that's not a racial joke. It's not a racist joke. Racist jokes, evil jokes, are value-laden jokes. They devalue the individual. And so they turn the person into something, not because it's funny, they turn the person into something unvaluable. And so when you start taking a black person or a white person or a female or even a male, it doesn't matter, and you take them and you degrade them, dehumanize and degrade them into something that they are actually not. That has anything to do with like stereotypes or, you know, like, oh, certain people are worse drivers than, you know, blonde jokes would then become like, is that like, you know, are we talking about like we can't do blonde jokes, which seems to be a silly stereotype about
if
a lot
you
of
do blonde jokes, is it okay to do bleach blonde jokes but not natural blonde jokes?
Right. Well, yeah, exactly.
You're not really making fun of the bleach blonde joke.
I do think that it's important to simply step back and really ask, does this hit the core of the value of a person? And does it devalue them as a human being made in the image of God? Or is this just one of those funny observations of the generalities of a group of people that exist? I mean, I know there's generalities of a lot of white people that are just funny as all get out when it's observed by like a Seinfeld or somebody like that. And then they make their entire comedy routine based on stereotypes of a New Yorker or whatever. Go ahead.
Come on. Now, sometimes on Sundays, clapping on beat can be a difficult thing.
Yes.
Right? So I'm not going to be like, okay.
White men really can't jump. And we know.
Because it does happen sometimes.
We need a person of color over there making fun of us white people.
No. It's just that we know how to clap on 1 and 3.
Yeah. I will say, I do not like to clap in church because I get into the song and realize I'm off beat. I start off with everybody, and then I realize I'm off beat.
And then I walk up next to you and I'm like,
for stereotypes.
And then Greg's like, you got no spirit, man. You got no spirit. Let me lay hands on you, brother.
Let's throw some jazz in here. It is true. There's this commonality of Germans being very, very stoic. In fact, I threw that joke out that here I've got the stoic Germans on the subway, and in comes my friend Nick, who's got Argentinian, Spanish, you know, this Hispanic background. It's like, hello, what's up going on? Like he's all energized, and they're like, what is happening? This is crazy. So I tell this whole thing. People are laughing. I don't think that's racist at all. In fact, a lady comes up to me afterwards. She's like, I come from that area. That was exactly right. That is how we are. Yeah. And she was endeared by the whole thing.
It used to be seen.
Stereotypical. Yeah. Not value laden. I wasn't like, they're all Nazis. They're not. That would be evil to do that kind of stuff. And so I do think that the difference between a coarse joke, something that is tearing down, does not have any intention to build anybody up. It's not like when we were kind of having some debate over the Old Testament and kind of the body aspects of what will go on.
B-A-U-D-Y.
And naked body.
B-A-W-D-Y.
Yeah, B-A-W-D-Y.
I had to look it up. That's why I know.
Body. And so where there's a sense of being nude and they're laying there and eating dung. And
they're doing
like,
things that are kind of crass.
This is crass. This is weird. This is wrong. But again, God's intention here is corrective. This is a corrective conversation. He's using this is like what we would do with our children when we sit down and go, can I tell you a joke? And then you tell the worst, most racist joke in the world. And it's like, do you think that's funny? No, I feel really embarrassed that you even said that.
I would have said yes, but inappropriate.
Or whatever, like even if it was like, but sometimes you will say things you do not want your children ever saying or doing to elicit the appropriate response to go, this is why we don't do this.
Yeah, you're showing the absurdity in order to make the point.
And that's what the prophets were doing. And sometimes that's appropriate in preaching.
Well, sometimes comedians have an intent to do.
Right. But you have to, it's a careful thing, especially when we're talking amongst friends.
Well, your motives, you got to check your heart.
Check your heart, check your motives.
And I would say one of the things with friendships too is, friendships are good and healthy in many ways, but also there is an intentionality to friendships too, and it should drive you more to spiritual depth, And I remember I used to have a very close friend. Me and Nancy had a couple friend, and we hung out 4 nights a week. And one time it was just like, we just hang out. We need to have more spiritual focus in our friendship. And when you were talking on the sermon too, you were talking about the coarse joking and the fact that you and your buddies started going in that direction, and it just kind of, ended up corrupting things. And it just kind of reminded me, I'm doing a study in the book of Jude right now. And Jude really is warning about corrupt teachers or false teachers, infiltrating the church and being among them. And one thing that was interesting in that study that I'm looking at is he never really criticized their theology. He criticized the corrupt life, and the corrupt morals of these teachers. And he never really attacked their theology. And so again, I do think poor theology can warp your faith, but behavior patterns will corrupt it even faster, because you get comfortable and you find yourself way off path and down a path very quickly, So I just thought that was really, really interesting that he didn't really challenge their theology, because I think sometimes we keep thinking knowledge. And really, when you look at, the Sermon on the Mount and everything, it was character and behavior.
And what would James would say? What good is your beliefs without
doing them and carrying
action
them
and doing
Yeah.
it? Like your what you do represents really what you truly believe.
Yeah, and what you know.
And so be careful
Until
what
you
you
know
let
it.
in. If you just, if you are allowing yourself to be intoxicated when you're with your friends, that's going to lead to corruptive behavior and poor decisions. If you allow yourself to degrade people, whether it be political or whether it be, genderish or whether it be anything else, it's going to corrupt the way that God has designed us to care for and love one another too. So,
but we could go on. We probably could pick this up next week and keep talking about it. And as we be next week talking about the idea of how do you lose friends and what happens when you lose friends. It'll be a little bit more of a that'll be heavy, but we'll make sure to make some bad jokes in the middle of it. So, but we're just glad that you guys did join us for today. We've got a couple questions we'll pick up next week, but for this week, we're just glad that you hung out with us and you had a bit of a listening on our conversation, but we would like to have a conversation with you, and the only way we can do that is by you talking to us and letting us know what your questions are. And you can send us those questions. You can send us those comments. You can engage in the conversation through sending us an email at obcc. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. If you want to make a comment, Stephen will pick it up, and we would love to answer your questions, hear your comments, however it is. We're just glad that you joined us today. Thanks for being with us, and God bless the rest of your week.
That's right. And remember, friendship is about talking and listening. So you do a lot of listening, you can email us to do the talking. We do the talking. We'd love to read your emails to do the listening. So do it. Boom, chakalaka.
Bye.